Even though you're using a computer to create your animation, it's still a good idea to become familiar with traditional animation concepts. Now I'm going to talk about just a few of them, but there are tons of references online. I'm going to go to Google real fast to show you that all you have to do is enter something like animation principles, and there's a ton of resources for you. And as you see in this PDF right here, I'm going to talk about just a few of them. Of course, I'm going to talk about squash and stretch. I'm going to talk about anticipation, follow through, and some other things. So let's go ahead back to Toom Boom Studio and talk about the principles as applied to this ship. Now, just to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the select tool, and I'm going to deform the ship to talk about some of the principles for you. Now, squash and stretch. If you ever watched a Disney picture, such as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or any old movies like that, you've seen squash and stretch, primarily when a character walks. Now, what happens is when a character is walking, especially a very cartoony character, when they deform and take a step down, they will squash a little bit like this. And then when they move back up again, they'll stretch. If a character is going to fall from a great distance, in the case of this demonstration, this ship, what would happen is, as the object is falling, it's going to be a little compressed like that as it's falling. And then when it hits the ground, it's going to squash to show the principles of that gravity. And then it's going to spring back up just a little bit like so, actually going higher than it originally is until it settles back down. So that's an example of squash and stretch. Now let's talk about anticipation. Before something actually goes into motion, it moves a little bit in the opposite direction. Now, what I'd like for you to do is sit back on your chair and get up. Did you notice that you bent backwards just a little bit to gain the momentum to get out of your chair? Well, that's an example of anticipation. So if this ship were a spaceship, what it would do before it lifts off is it would pull back just a little bit and then go about its business. And that's an example of anticipation. Another example of anticipation is a pitcher for a baseball team. Before the pitcher throws that ball, he's going to wind up quite a bit, and he's going to do a lot of different motions to show that he's about to throw that ball. So that's another example of anticipation. It just gives the audience the feeling that a character is about to do something because he's going to do something in a slightly different direction before he follows through with whatever motion he's going to perform. And that brings me to follow through. Follow through is pretty much the exact opposite of anticipation. So if this ship is going really, really fast, what happens is it's going to stretch in a little bit if it was a cartoony ship, and then it's going to follow through by coming back to its original position. The same can be said if you are doing some jumping jacks, for example. After you perform the jumping jacks and you stop jumping, your hands are going to slowly go to your sides and you're going to slouch just a little tiny bit to show that you're maybe exhausted. So you follow through with that action completely. Now let's talk about something that's really important. A silhouette. If you were going to do animation, you have to sell the shot to the audience so that they're not confused. So what I'm going to do is actually move this guy all the way over here. Well, you know what? I'll get rid of him for now because we don't need that. Now, it's important that your audience is able to read the emotions and the gestures of your character. And the rule of thumb is to, see if you can understand what's happening in a silhouette. So let's make believe we have a character doing a kung fu kick, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just do a very quick drawing here, and just to see if we can figure out what's going on. So if you were animating something, you might not pick up on what that is. So what you have to do is think through, okay, well maybe the audience would get it more clearly if I did a little bit more of a profile of that kick. So what you have to do when you're preparing to do your animation is you have to think about the scenes so that the audience can figure out what's happening more clearly. So keep in mind when you're animating, squash, stretch, anticipation, follow through, and you also want to think about the silhouettes so that the characters are able to perform in a way that the audience can easily read what's happening. Don't forget, check out your websites like google.com or any search engine and enter animation principles or animation concepts or anything like that. And also check your local bookstores. There's tons of information on the animation techniques of the past that are still relevant today.